Think you know Roman emperors, brutal conquerors, cunning politicians, perhaps a little mad? Well, buckle up because the most terrifying thing about Emperor Nero wasn't his fires or his assassinations. It was his poetry. Imagine a ruler so utterly consumed by his own artistic genius that if you didn't clap loud enough for his latest lute solo, you could literally lose your head. Welcome to the chilling reality of ancient Rome, where the applause was a matter of life and death. You probably know Nero as the emperor who supposedly fiddled while Rome burned. But what history textbooks rarely tell you is that Nero genuinely believed he was the greatest poet, singer, and lyre player who ever lived. Forget conquering nations. Nero's true obsession was the stage. He composed thousands of lines of poetry, wrote epic tragedies, and practiced his singing voice for hours every day, convinced he was a divine talent. His masterpieces were, well, let's just say history has not been kind to his artistic legacy. But to Nero, these weren't just poems, they were sacred texts. His performances weren't mere entertainment, they were mandatory imperial decrees. And you, the audience, were not there to enjoy. You were there to affirm his genius. Any deviation from utter adoration was considered not just bad taste, but a direct insult to the emperor himself. Imagine being a Roman senator, a distinguished general, or a wealthy merchant. Your day involves important state affairs, managing your vast estates or commanding legions. Then a royal decree arrives. Tonight you must attend Emperor Nero's latest recital. Failure to appear is unthinkable. You show up, dressed in your finest toga, to find a packed theater. Not with enthusiastic fans, but with hundreds of terrified citizens. Nero would stroll onto the stage, lyre in hand, often dressed in outlandish costumes, sometimes even as a god or goddess. His performances weren't short either. We're talking hours-long epics, often covering Greek myths or his own glorious achievements. He'd sing off-key, recite poetry that put even the most stoic Roman to sleep, and play his lyre with the skill of a frustrated amateur. But here's the truly horrifying part: the applause. Nero had an entire claque, a group of professional clappers who he paid handsomely to lead the ovation. They had three types of applause: the buzz, like bees, the tile, like clashing tiles, and the brick, a thunderous, sustained roar. And you, the audience, had to follow their lead. If you didn't clap with enough fervor, if your facial expression betrayed boredom, or God forbid, if you fell asleep during his performance, your life was on the line. Some courtiers would literally feign illness, fleeing the city just to avoid these mandatory death traps disguised as concerts. Women sometimes gave birth in the theaters, driven by sheer terror of offending the emperor by leaving. You don't learn this in history classes, but Nero didn't just exile people for bad reviews. He executed them. Take the case of Publius Clodius Thrasea Paetus, a respected senator who apparently had the audacity to suggest that other poets might also have some merit. Nero took this as a personal affront to his divine talent. Paetus was forced to commit suicide. Or consider the numerous aristocrats and even his own family members who were encouraged to end their lives after failing to demonstrate sufficient enthusiasm for Nero's artistic endeavors. Their perceived lack of appreciation was interpreted as a deep-seated disloyalty, a challenge to his very authority. To Nero, rejecting his art was rejecting him. He had spies mingling in the audience, watching faces, listening for whispers, noting any unenthusiastic claps. A single yawn could seal your fate. People would literally practice their applause at home, trying to get it just right, just vigorous enough to avoid the emperor's wrath. The very act of watching a play became a psychological minefield. Modern historians and psychologists believe Nero suffered from severe narcissistic personality disorder coupled with absolute unchecked power. He wasn't just vain, he was utterly deluded. His artistic aspirations were genuine to him, and anyone who failed to recognize them was not merely a critic, but an enemy. This isn't just about a king who loved poetry. It's about a man so fragile in his self-perception that he had to forcibly extract adoration, turning his entire empire into a captive audience for his monstrous ego. The same emperor who murdered his own mother, kicked his pregnant wife to death, and persecuted Christians, saw himself as a sensitive artist, a true patron of the muses. The contrast is chilling. So the next time you hear about Nero, remember it wasn't just the fires or the gladiators. It was the terrifying reality of a king whose greatest obsession was his own pathetic art, and whose punishments for a bad review were more brutal than any modern critic could imagine. His legacy isn't just one of tyranny, but of extreme, almost comical vanity, enforced with a terrifying brutality that redefined what it meant to be a captive audience. If these disturbing truths about imperial madness fascinate you, hit that subscribe button, because ancient history is full of horrors that textbooks conveniently leave out. And trust me, we're just scratching the surface.